All right, folks, welcome to today's webinar. I am your host, Ryan Faloona. I am here with an onboarding specialist, Jonathan Mallard, and with our special guest, Sandman from chat. So, Jonathan, Bernard, how are you guys doing today?
Doing okay. Better than yesterday.
Oh, that's good. That's a step up.
That's a step up.
Let's get right into it. As everyone knows, the market has been absolutely crazy these past few weeks. The coronavirus is spreading across the globe. Got a whole bunch of people worried, and not just people, but markets as well. So I'm really glad to have you guys on here. I wanted to discuss several things: the market itself, the conditions we find ourselves in, the virus itself, and then anything that we can do to use Pro in order to capture that information and give us a better chance at making profitable trades. So, Bernard, I want to start off with you here, if that's okay. What are your thoughts on just the virus itself, and then as a secondary part, the overall reaction by the market to the virus?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit about it in the room this morning, and I don't come into any particular day being bullish or bearish because I'm always coming in fresh and starting from zero on any given day. But I don't see the upside impetus short of good news on the virus, whether that be the virus numbers starting to flatten out or a clinical, I should say, stress that word clinical breakthrough with remdesivir or hydrochloroquine or some of the other things that they're working on. And I don't think it's good enough to have the anecdotal stories, obviously not, otherwise Gilead stock would be over 100. But we need clinical data for that. And so that's one thing. The other thing is oil. Oil is a really, really big drag on the market. Whiting Petroleum used to be a great company, filed for Chapter 11 today, WLL. There are going to be a lot more of them. So, and that's also all by itself going to have an impact on the economy and on the market and on credit markets. I think 15 to 18% of junk debt is related to energy. So you have a knock on there. I just don't see the upside impetus short of something happening with one of those two things.
Now, real quick. Now, yesterday you had mentioned the virus yesterday and hydroxychloroquine. Yesterday, I saw a tweet that hydroxychloroquine was approved by the FDA to treat COVID. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, that seems like a positive, but I see what you mean about wanting data and wanting to see how this actually pans out.
But they had to do, Ryan, they had to do that so that doctors could administer it even on a trial basis. They are doing trials now with the hydroxychloroquine, but you still have to have clinical proof that this is actually providing a benefit. And we have a ton of stories that it does, but if you actually have clinical proof, and so that somebody like Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx can stand up there and say, okay, this will help people, this will move people, this will prevent people from ending up in an ICU ward. That's a big deal. That's going to take pressure off the whole system. It'll save lives, and we don't have that yet. So that's what. If you see a clinical data supporting one of these things, it would be a big boost for the market. We don't have it yet.
Now, the other thing is that the market is often a forward indicator. So and sometimes it's as far as 6 months forward indicator. So I'm wondering if we start to see a substantial rebound in the market, can we infer from that the market is actually pricing in success fighting this virus off, and that things might return to normal, back to the strong economic fundamentals that we had going before the virus? Is that safe to infer, or is that misreading this?
You asking me?
Yes.
Okay. So well, we just had that. We had a 20% rally off bottom, and I don't think it has anything to do with seeing into the future, because right now it's very, very cloudy. You have people all over the place on what the upshot of this is going to be, and I mean, until that's more clear, until we have a better visibility into the future, we're going to have a difficult market. One thing I do think is that, and some people disagree, and it's okay. Was going back and forth with a few people online and in the room and all. I do think we're going to have a very changed circumstance. I mean, I can't imagine that people will go through this much like the last financial crisis that we had and not save more. People are going to be thinking, my God, sometimes I might need more money than I had when I went through that, and I'll never go through that again. I'll never be in that position again. So as a result, you may have people, when they're able to, they're not even able to do that now. We're not there yet. But when we do get back to some type of normal. And then the other thing, and I've been talking to this, I have one family member who's very, very involved with it. He works, he's a COO of the competitor of Aramark, right? And that's a business that caters, that provides food services to stadiums and all kinds of special events. They do the Kentucky Derby, they do Pebble Beach and all that. And I said to him, I said, while you have this, they're basically, except for prisons, they're basically out of business. So, okay, got the screen up.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the chart while we're talking about it. Sorry about that.
So anyway, I said to him, I said, while you have this downtime, think about what you're going to need to do in your industry to make people feel safer. That's going to be a big deal, I think. Now, some people said to me, no, it'll take, people just go back to doing whatever. They're not going to stop going to a stadium. They're not going to stop doing, going to a movie theater and all. If you ask me, I think that it's going to be an issue. I can't see people just reverting back to shaking hands and being in close quarters, or being in a restaurant where they don't know exactly how, what the health standards of the restaurant are. They can't see them. Maybe people's temperatures get scanned at the door. They have the technology to do it. And I know there's some companies in Silicon Valley right now that are racing to provide packages for such situations. People who in restaurants, people who sports franchises and all that own stadiums and all. So I think we're gonna be in a bit of a different world. There will be winners and there will be losers.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that totally. It actually kind of in that regard, it kind of reminds me of 9/11. Post 9/11, airport security and flight security was much more paramount. And I feel like you might have the same type of effect as it applies to social distancing after this is all behind us, even if we do get a vaccine and even if we do successfully fight it off and all of that. So that's a really good point.
I didn't mean to interrupt. We put federal agents on every flight so people would feel safer.
Right.
So people would feel safe to fly.
Exactly
That's what we did. This is a different type of thing. So I don't know what they do to calm people about the health risk of getting on a plane and being in that situation. But there have to be things that they can do, and they better do them, because it's going to take a lot longer otherwise.
Well, so if you take a look at some of like the food service providers right now, restaurants that are still doing takeout and carry out, I mean, not a day goes by where I don't see a new foods company or a restaurant that is advertising their contactless delivery and all of that. And, on pizza boxes, they have special tape now that you can see if the seal was broken. So I would imagine those types of things are going to keep going. Now, I will say that, what were they doing before? I would still hope they were not coming into contact with my food before this whole virus, but that's just me making light of the situation. So I do think that there are going to be some other things that are going to be long-standing and as a result of this. Now, earlier, Bernard, you had mentioned Gilead. Was there any other stock that you think, in terms of like actually directly related to the virus, that you are watching on a regular basis? There's actually one trader in the room who I talked to off hours who actually has done it, but it's an expensive issue. But Regeneron, if you gave me $10,000 and you said you can only buy one stock, in terms of the virus, that's the one I would buy. And you can see what it looks like on a chart and why it looks that way. This is a company that, in a very relatively short period of time, and it's different. It's not a vaccine company. They made an antigen cocktail for Ebola that crushed the existing standard, which was MAP. It was the trials. The trial just crushed what they were administering for the disease, and it's pretty effective in preventing people from getting it. So they give you an antigen cocktail, and it gives you great protection against the virus. So I've got to think that the CEO is very optimistic about being able to do it. But they're going to start that trial, I believe, in June for antigens. They also have another drug which will stop. We'll know sooner on, which would lessen inflammation in the lungs. But Regeneron, I have a lot of. I would have a lot of faith in that company to be able to come up with something, and they would have that. The reason, that was the thing I wanted to mention. The reason that I like it so much is because that antigen cocktail
could be produced a lot sooner than a vaccine. We're not going to have a vaccine before next year. It's not going to happen. But that could be done, and they can scale that up too. And they get other companies to scale it up, which they already said they would be willing to do. Other companies would also make it. So they could produce it in large quantities, and we would have something preventing us being infected by the virus. So that's the company right there. And obviously, I'm not the only one that thinks that, because look at how it's been doing.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually something that I've traded options on in the past. I actually really like
Great company.
Yeah, great company. I like their pipeline as well. And obviously, the more they get involved in this COVID thing, the more traction they're going to have. Now, so we bring up a really great point here. So we're looking at this chart here. Clearly, it's quite volatile. Clearly, they're involved in the news on a regular basis because of what you were just mentioning. I would kind of like to just shift gears a little bit before we go back to the market and say, what kind of things were we looking for? How can we actually use Benzinga Pro to try and figure out when we actually get positive news, or even simpler than that, when to enter or exit this trade? Obviously, I'm not talking about giving trade advice, but I'm just trying to think of how can we actually capture some of the news about this particular stock and actually place a trade off of that. So, Jonathan, I know that you have actually done like biotech category filtering before. Do you have any insight into this at all?
Right. So, a great way to take a look at that, Ryan, would just to be click on the overview tab underneath the price quote. Yeah. So here's the overview tab within the details tool. And, with a volatile stock like this, you can just take a peek at all of the news items underneath there. And you'll see that Ryan has some highlighted items here. So you could take a look at those blue-green items. And I bet you that's tagged with biotech or healthcare.
You're exactly right.
Right there at the bottom. And so, just as you see these companies pop up time and time again, whether that's using our scanner like the movers tool or just taking a look at the news feed and seeing what happens, then pay attention to those category tags, because then you can go over to the news feed tool, filter for those categories, set up alerts, and then know as quickly as possible as soon as that news breaks.
And so I wanted to add one more thing there before I turn it back over to Bernard for some more specifics here. I also have, you did correctly point out that the biotech I actually have colored as like this light blue, almost teal, so that it stands out in the actual newsfeed. Just makes it very much easier for me to see. And you can see that this one here is actually, this was a post on Sunday, and this is actually about the coronavirus and how it relates to Regeneron. Excuse me. The other thing that I did here was I actually color-coded the press release sources, and that's obviously added in here in the All tab. In case Regeneron issues some of this, or any other stock, frankly, issues some information about a trial or a particular drug, if they release a press release through that, it's actually going to come through the press release source sooner than the Benzinga wire source. So I actually have that colored purple in the hopes that we're able to catch something here as soon as we see it. Now, Bernard, I know that...
Ryan, do you ever set up the email alerts for those, you or Bernard for that matter, from the watch list tool? Is that helpful for you?
I don't set up the email alerts because I'm mostly in front of my platform every day. And what ends up happening is that I have a whole bunch of emails that I have to go through. And because I was at my computer, I actually saw those news items break while I was there. Now, I will say if I actually leave, I do turn on my email alerts, because if I leave either for a vacation or an event or some type of work meeting or something, anything that takes me away from my computer where I can't monitor what's going on, yes, Jonathan, I absolutely set up those alerts, because that's how I quickly review things when I have some free time, whether it be a lunch break or after my engagement or whatever. Yes, I do.
You just show them that on the watch list tool really quick? Because let's say, this is a great example. You love the company, you want to follow it, you're expecting news to come out on this company. And so here Ryan has, one of his main watch lists. And then if you wanted to set up those alerts for any of these watch lists, you just click on the watch list and then click on the bell symbol within the watch list tool. And here you could set up a sound alert if you're at your computer, like he's talking about. Or, for press releases or SEC filings, you could click on those toggle switches and activate the email alerts.
Yeah, and I actually like the email summary too, because that actually gives me a jumping off point. And then if I read something through that summary that's intriguing, I can actually go back through the individual names and do any more research that's necessary. So great call there, Jonathan. I appreciate it. And this is how you set the alerts up. One more thing, you also have the bell in the upper right corner. And if you click on that, you can actually set up sound or email alerts based on a specific newsfeed category. So in this case, I'd absolutely turn on FDA if I was walking away. Also, market moving exclusives seem to be pretty important right now. And then same with news as well. Those are generally the three that I set up with any type of regularity. Bernard, do you ever use any of the alerts, or are you just pretty much, I'm always
here. I'm always at the desk.
Yep.
And you're using a lot of tools too, right? I mean, we know you use Benzinga Pro, obviously, but is it difficult to differentiate between do you use any sound alerts, or other than the Squawk?
Well, I mean, the Squawk is a sound alert for me, and I use sound alerts on an option a sweep service that I have. That also triggers by sound, so I'm always hearing that. I have a lot of input into my headset during the day.
Right.
So
cool.
And now, so Bernard, I was saying, if we were looking at a stock like Regeneron or any other biotech that might be, having some type of trial or some type of drug in the pipeline that they're using to fight this, obviously coronavirus is in the headlines pretty much everywhere you go. Yeah. But if you're looking for a biotech stock in particular, what types of headlines are you actually looking for? What is the type of headline that you think is actually going to have an impact on the stock or is going to move it?
Well, the thing about Regeneron that's nice is that it's a great company without any virus news. It's something that's going to do well for the next decade. Probably be bought out. They don't have that many shares out, so it could be bought out easily. So I like it on that basis. But I mean, look, anytime any one of these companies can, and even if you don't get that first burst of news when they've actually been they've succeeded through a phase 3 for a drug. They always use $1 billion as the benchmark, and they mean $1 billion a year, of course, revenues when they talk about that. But anytime you see a drug that gets approval that succeeds in a phase 3, and if they have a history of succeeding, that also helps. So those are the kinds that's pretty basic, but that's what you want to see. You want to see these companies are pretty competent at getting through the FDA process. It's not something a lot of companies have a and even larger companies have they get turned down frequently in stage 3. So, but you don't have to take the chance of being in before that. But after that, yeah, you can get a lot of mileage out of a company after it's gotten a phase 3 approval. Even though you might miss that first move up, there's usually a reaction off that first move up, and the stock will pull. Great time to buy it after that. And I'd say that I actually say that about any. I could expand that to any kind of inflectional news. News that you would say is an inflection for a company. Sometimes when a company has an earnings quarter that nobody's expecting, that first dip after the initial push is a great time to buy, because those types of things normally have legs. So. I've gone beyond just biotechs, but it's true. It's true of any company.
No, and that's a really good point. And just to your point here, so what I did was I actually opened up a news feed right next to Regeneron, and I typed in phase 3 as a keyword filter. So I'm basically filtering out all of the news that don't involve the keyword phase 3. And then to refine that even more, I actually added a stock ticker filter. So now I'm only seeing news that uses phase 3 in the actual piece of news and is tied to Regeneron in some way. And so this is actually a very quick way to go through and kind of review any news that you may have missed. You can see that there is some news posts as soon as yesterday. And of course, you don't have to have a stock filter on there. You can obviously remove Regeneron and put on anything else, or you could actually filter by a watch list. You can move between your keyword and stock filters in the newsfeed by using your arrow keys. So this is a really good example here of how you can actually review what's going on. Now, I did have a really quick question I wanted to cover before we get back to this. What is the difference between Benzinga Wire and press releases? The press release source is a bunch of different press release companies. So if I go into the sources category here and I click on press releases, let me move our pictures out of the way. You can see these are all of the different press release companies that we have a deal with. So if any company releases a press release through one of these wires, it gets piped into Benzinga as well. The Benzinga wire is actually our analysts and our commentary. So it's quite possible that a press release is issued, has information in it, and then we want to either add some color to that or repurpose that press release so that it's easier to read. We actually do this with earnings. Company will release their earnings report, and we'll actually go back and then post that under the Benzinga wire, and we'll highlight some of the important numbers, like, you know, what is the EPS, what is the revenue, what is the sales, what is the year-over-year comparison. So really great question. I actually like to put both of those on.
Yeah. And just one more point on that, Ryan, is that's really the value that our news desk provides. Is there's thousands and thousands of these press releases and SEC filings every day. So, you know, if you're not adept at knowing where to look for that information, it's very helpful just to have the BZ wire there. So it's called curated for a reason. It's because they narrow down that information and get to whatever's most important, along with those tags, so that then you can set those alerts and those filters and that type of thing. And then there were a couple more. You might have been already about to answer these questions, Ryan, but there's a couple questions about sound alerts for signals, and then the buy and sell buttons that they see on your details tool right now.
Right. So the buy and sell buttons, let me just address that really quickly. We're really excited about this. We are actually going to be releasing a new feature that's going to allow you to link your broker to your platform and then trade directly from your platform. And the object here is that we're trying to speed things up, right? So if you're going through the newsfeed list and you see a news post about, you know, like a brand new release about a phase 3 trial that was successful or whatever the case may be, we want to give you the option to buy right from the platform instead of having to go to your broker, input the order, et cetera, et cetera. So this is actually something that we're still working the kinks out of. That's why you see it on my screen and not yours. This will be released. I don't have a release date yet, but this will be released as part of the subscription that you currently have. You won't have to do anything. It'll just be available one morning for you.
And just so you guys know, the first brokerages that will be available for, we plan on expanding it to as many as possible, but just out of the box, that'll be available for Robinhood, Drive Wealth, E-Trade, Ally, Tradeler, and Interactive Brokers. So we'll be working on all the like TDA, you know, all of the other ones, but that's what will be available at first.
Great question and some sharp eyes out there. That's nice. And then the other question is about what about the sound notification on signals? Can we pick or change to another sound? However, you can't do that right now, but that is a common request that we will look into doing in the future. I don't have any timeline on that, but yes, we definitely are going to be doing a lot of work on alerts in the future, and we'll probably start with the signals tool. So great question there. All right, so this is a really good example here. Regeneron, I agree with you, Bernard. Regeneron is a great company. This is something that I trade options in all the time. I actually don't own this for the long term. Kind of wish I did, but I do like to trade options in the short term. Regeneron, Gilead is actually one that I've recently been dipping my toes in on because of all of this news. Now, is there anything else in particular? I know you had mentioned oil, and we talked a little bit about the coronavirus. And if there's more color on that you want to fill in, I'd love to do that as well. But what else are you looking for on a daily basis? I know that you're a day trader, so you're cash at 4 every day. But when you wake up in the morning, what is the first thing that you're looking for? Do you have like a process? Do you review news from overnight? What is your process to actually like reducing that universe into a manageable amount?
So before I start my day, I'm spending an hour between Bloomberg and CNBC, just trying to get the flavor of what's some people won't be happy it's not Fox Business, but no, it's Bloomberg and CNBC, and I couldn't resist. Bloomberg and CNBC, and so by the time after I watch that for about an hour, I take a shower, and I'm usually on this machine between 7 and 7:30. And so I kind of already have a sense of, what they think is important. And then I'm looking at news. I'm looking at the news coming across the wires, or I'm kind of listening to the box by that time. But what I will look for on a day like today, for instance, is, and it worked pretty well today, in a market that opens down as much as we did today. What did we open down? 9 SPY points, whatever the heck it was. But on that open, you had certain stocks, and of course, in Kroger's case, it was because of a piece of news. But if you bought Kroger off the open and just kind of sat back, just because of relative action, so that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for stocks that are relatively strong. Invariably, those stocks will give you a nice trade if they're bucking the trend, with such a strong tide against them. There were a few others as well. Pinduoduo today, PDD, was relatively strong.
Costco too.
U.S. Steel, Costco, Alcoa, I guess because of all the infrastructure talk. And now I'm seeing as we're talking that Pelosi's making comments about the fact that they try to move the same bill that they did earlier. It's a $760 billion plan over 5 years. So maybe there is potential for an infrastructure deal. I don't know. But so I'm just trying to get a lay of the land, but it's really simple. I mean, I've talked about it a bit about it in the room a bit, but if I'm trying to trade off of a day like this, I'm looking for relative action, and I'm looking for relative action to the upside. It works the opposite way too. On a big green open, if you have stocks that are acting relatively poorly, it also works the other way as well. Those things will probably give you a decent short down.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. One of the things that I do myself is I'm hesitant to buy on big green days. First of all, most of my trades, if they're not actually investments, if they're actually trades, are designed to be swings, not necessarily day trades. I'm looking to capture some pretty good movement, and it's normally around some type of event. And so I actually like to buy stocks when we have a red open. I actually like to buy some of that fear. And one of the ways that I'm able to do that is actually by using options. I define my risk early on. I have a trade plan going in saying this is the max amount that I'll lose. And if it's a particular company, I'll think to myself, well, I'm not really sure that this company should go in. Costco is a really good example of that, right? Costco was trading down in the pre-market a little bit today, seemingly no news to justify the action. Obviously, it was trading in sympathy with the market, which the futures before the open today were, Dow was down 800 points or whatever on the futures. So I get that, but at the same time, I see Costco as one of the companies to really come out of this stronger. I feel like people are loading up at Costco all the time. Every time I go to Costco, it's crowded. They have plenty of product. They're in no danger of losing product, which is great because all of this demand for their product, people are paying for it. The other thing is that a lot of the stuff that people are loading up on, like sanitizers, toilet paper, paper towels, things of that nature, Costco is no longer allowing returns on, which I think is great because A, there's no reason to hoard this stuff, but B, you don't want to have a whole bunch of extra income from those purchases and then have people return them and have to pay that right back out. So Costco to me is actually something that I'm looking at every single day. Today would have been a perfect opportunity. I admit I was distracted at the open today. I placed no trade on Costco today, so I didn't catch this. I really wanted to, but I was trying to wait for the first couple of minutes after the open to shake out. Now, one more thing I wanted to do to kind of supplement this idea is I'm like you, so I don't quite have the same routine that you do, Sandman. I actually don't watch TV before I sit down at my computer. My computer is the first thing that I sit down at. But I drink my coffee, I kind of get ready for the day, I take a shower, and then I sit down here and I open up Pro. The very first thing I do is I turn on the Squawk, because the Squawk is always going to alert me to things that I may not have my eye on. And because it's audio and Charlie's so good at reading that stuff as it's breaking, it's one of the most beneficial tools in the entire platform. I use it every single day, and it is the first thing I do every single day. The second thing that I do is I actually use the movers tool. And the reason that I use the movers tool is that this is actually a very helpful way to figure out what's going on. Again, some things I'm thinking about, some things are in the front of my mind. Stocks like Apple, Costco, Square, Goldman Sachs, things of that nature are at the front of my mind when I wake up because I want to see what's going on. But there are plenty of other stocks out there that I'm maybe not as aware of. And the first thing that I like to do is I like to come in here and I want to see what's going up in the pre-market. So I set my movers tool to gainers, pre-market, and session because I'm only concerned about the entire pre-market. Obviously when I wake up, the regular session isn't open yet. And I first want to see things that are moving up. Maybe there's a big piece of news that I missed or something that was unanticipated. Heck, we might find Regeneron on here one morning after they release a press release about how they're doing treating COVID and such. And a lot of the times I'll review mostly the first 10 or 15 stocks in this list. And I'll kind of just take a look. Some of them I recognize, some of them I don't. But I often will click through them. And it's great because it loads it up in the details tool. It allows me to view the news feed as well as other helpful company information. And in some cases, it actually has a why is it moving at the top in the details tool. And that can actually be very helpful because it tells me right away why something is actually moving. Now, I don't have one here. You can see here that in its place on ticker IFRX, it's telling you that the earnings is coming up here. So this can actually be very helpful in terms of figuring out what's going on or what you missed over the course of the evening. Here we go. Here's NAOV, ticker NAOV has a why is it moving, Nanovibronics, which I'm not familiar with the stock. Shares are trading higher after the company announced it has received reimbursement approval from the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services as its pain shield. So I really like the why is it moving tool because, again, this is a perfect example. Stocks that are not on my radar, that I have no prior knowledge about, I'm able to figure out why exactly that's moving within a couple of seconds, reading a 1 or 2 second headline. Now, Jonathan, do you have any morning routine? I know you're on the front lines a lot. There are a lot of questions that the users are asking you about what to do when we first start, or how do I find or capture things that are going on?
Yeah, on my group demos that I do, this is pretty much, I just tell people this right here, what you have in front of you, is my favorite workspace, other than the news feed, other than my filtered news feed. And so just like you have it here with the pre-market set for session, you can see in real time in the pre-market, those gaps. And all you do is just click through these tickers, because people are asking me, Jonathan, there's so much noise out there. How do I filter it all down to get something that's actually actionable? And so if you just scroll down on your newsfeed tool and look at those categories of the news items that cause that volatility, then really that's how you learn, which news is actionable and which is just noise. So this is what I go through is, you just click through those tickers, check on the news catalyst, and then filter your news feed by those types of catalysts.
Awesome. So it sounds like you have a very similar procedure to what I do, which is great. And Bernard, it kind of sounds like Jonathan and I are doing the same thing, just using a different medium in order to accomplish that. Is there any type of like news that you review in Pro right when you start, or do you pretty much get it just from what they're kind of talking about on TV? I know with TV, they're often talking about things that are, hot right now or very common, or things that have a lot of eyeballs on them. Do you ever venture away from that?
Well, you know what I'll do too. I'll just read through the news feed, through the general news feed. I oftentimes it may be an idea that I'm not necessarily even on, and sometimes I'll read something that'll give me an idea. So I don't really like to restrict it to, say, a watch list that I'm looking at. So I just read. I'll just go through the whole news feed. It's pretty easy to do. All the symbols are listed there. I see stocks that I might be interested, or groups that I might be interested in, and I go from there. But yeah, I do spend some time, I have time to do it, so I spend some time just reading. I also have Wall Street Journal online too, which I also use. Sure. Well,
and you had mentioned not long ago, you had actually mentioned that Pelosi was discussing the coronavirus stimulus package. Yeah. So I happened to notice here that there's a line item for that right away here. It says Pelosi says we'll act on the next coronavirus stimulus package. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up there is that if you're ever looking for that, this is very fortunate. It just happened to be there when I flipped over it and I was able to catch it. But if you're ever looking for stuff like that that's absolutely going to affect the entire market, Jonathan, I'm pretty sure that you recommend this as well. I like to tell customers that if they want to look for things like that, try filtering your news feed by SPY for the SPY, S&P 500 Spider ETF. And what's great here is that our news desk will often post big time market moving news posts to this particular ticker. And what's great about that is that it makes it fairly easy. Bernard, you were talking about just reading through the news feed. Here's a way where you can kind of do that even quicker. You simply just filter it by SPY, and now you can read through these headlines and see if there's anything that you might need to dive a little bit deeper into. In some cases, it's just a post like this. Obviously, we're citing here the post is from Reuters, but you can, in some other ones, there's going to be more content in the actual post that you can actually read through. And a lot of the times it will highlight the numbers so that it's easy to find. So this is also something that I do. I get this question a lot being behind the support desk. How do I find out things about like macro environments or the U.S. government? SPY is probably the best way to do that.
And then, I even have a watch list where it's the SPY, and then USO for oil, GLD for gold. There's some great ETFs that you can follow just to get a broader picture of the market.
That's a great point. And so that's actually, thanks for reminding me about that, Jonathan. I brought up USO here. Bernard, I know we touched on oil recently, and you had mentioned that it is an extremely important lever or input as to what's going on in the market here. So what I did here is I actually typed in USO, and you can see that there are a whole bunch of different news stories about oil. Now, what exactly are you looking for when it comes to how you're trying to trade around some of the oil news?
Well, it's interesting because I've been, and I'm not alone in this, but a lot of people I think are surprised that, let me see if it's still true, barely true, but that oil has been able to hold 20. So somebody I really trust on oil, who I know is very good with the energy area in general, has always been very good with it, said, well, that's not happening. It's not breaking 20 because everyone's short. Everyone's short the market. There's massive shorting in the market, which makes sense given the situation. But that doesn't give me such comfort because I could see why maybe you want to try to play a bounce off of 20, and that's what some people have been doing. But I'd play that with a really, really tight stop, because if it does break 20 and that level doesn't hold, I mean, there's nothing to prevent oil from going a lot lower. And I mean a lot lower, say like sub 10. I know it's hard to kind of think of that, but I don't, there's no place to put oil right now. Storage is full. I saw that the U.S. I see on the feed here that, it said that Mnuchin is going to, keep requesting monies to fill the SPR, but then I saw something else saying that the U.S. government may actually let people who need storage use the SPR to store oil there. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I guess it would be a bit more storage, but storage is full up. So at some point, I mean, there are reports all over the country of certain areas selling well below 20, and I guess it's for different type of oil and all. But I can't help but feel that, barring some agreement soon, that just the pileup of oil is going to drive that price lower. So I'm loath to disagree with the gentleman I was talking about in terms of the price on oil, because he's kind of constructive down there, and he may be right. He may be right on it because we are holding 20. But boy, if this goes on much longer in terms of full-out pumping, which Saudi said they're doing starting today, then I think we go lower. I think we go lower in oil, and that's another really big impediment to the market finding its footing and being able to make some constructive progress to the upside.
Now, so you mentioned that that's an impediment to the market. Isn't low oil
it does cut both ways. It does cut both ways.
Isn't low oil prices good for the consumer?
I was very chagrined. I think it was on Monday. I think it was on Monday that all this while I've been watching Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical is in the top 5 of the Dow losers, and I couldn't understand why that would be so severe, because their main stock, their feedstock is oil, and I think some natural gas, but mostly oil, I think. And then sure enough, on Monday, the CEO came out and said, our cash flow will be greater because of the lower price of oil. So yeah, it does cut both ways, but net, it's a bigger negative, because you're going to have a lot of defaults over this, a lot of defaults. and not just for the companies themselves, but some banks, not many, and they're smaller banks, they're specialized, but there are some banks that have a disproportionate amount of loans to the energy industry, and they're going to be in trouble. So it's just a big knock-on effect. I mean, it's going to affect a lot of the big part of the economy if this continues.
Are you watching any sector in particular to be affected by this the downdraft in oil and the price of oil here?
Well, obviously the industry itself, but I'm normally, this is almost a kind of a joke. Normally this would be great for airlines.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, I know, but I mean it's almost, like I said, it's a joke to even say it. So we're not even because the economy stopped. We're not even, aside from the fact that people may have slightly lower energy bills, and I suppose that's not nothing. But who's driving now? Even it's a lot of the benefit that we'd be getting from this lower price of oil isn't even happening because we're stopped as a country in terms of the economy.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I actually filled up. I made it a point to go fill up this weekend. You're absolutely right. I am not driving very much at all. I'm going to Costco and the grocery store, and that's about it in terms of my driving. Otherwise, I'm outside running or taking a walk. But I made it a point to fill up this weekend because I knew oil was so beaten down, and I wanted to go see it, and I was blown away. These numbers might not mean anything to you because you guys are in different states. I paid $2.34 for premium, for 93 octane premium at Costco this weekend. I can't tell you the last time that I paid under a $2.50 handle for oil, or for gasoline for my car. So even though I'm not really going to be using it, I wanted to fill up and I wanted to buy it at a low price. And of course, now it's probably even lower than that.
Is the regular under $2?
I think that it was. I can't remember. I haven't put regular in my car in many years, but I believe that it was.
In Detroit, I filled up at 142.
There you go.
Regular.
I know it's low in Detroit.
Now, keep in mind, I only drive a Prius C, so it's like literally $10 to fill.
You're gassing up once every 3 months.
Yeah, I could trade in for a Hummer.
Yeah.
All right, and then so I also have another question here. This question is from Art, some big time supporter of Benzinga Pro. This is a perfect forum to ask this question. Art, he's asking, can you go through again how to use Squawk, what you look for on Squawk, and how it pertains to trading opportunities? So what I would like to do here is I will show you exactly how to use Squawk and what some of the different things mean. It'll only take a minute, and then Bernard, I'd like to turn it over to you because I know that you love what Charlie does on the Squawk. Would you be able to tell Art exactly what it is that you're looking for and how you act on that?
Okay.
Let me go ahead and demo this real quick here. So the Squawk tool in general, like when you first load up Pro, your Squawk is going to be defaulted to off, and you can tell because the little dot to the upper right corner of the icon is white. When you mouse over the icon, you don't have to click anything. Just drag your mouse over it. You'll get the little menu that shoots out, and it'll say that the status is stopped. In order to turn that on, you just want to press the blue play button, and it'll say connected waiting for audio. If you are connected waiting for audio, that means you've made a successful connection to the Squawk server, and you're effectively just waiting for the Squawker to read that new information. Now here I have it on mute so that our webinar is not disrupted by Charlie breaking news. But if I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that, you can know if your Squawk is on mute or not if you can adjust the volume slider. If you can adjust the volume slider, that means you're not muted. You click the mute button, you will be muted, and then to unmute yourself, click the unmute button. You'll also notice that the dot will actually light up. It will change to like a lit up green when something is being broadcasted. So I know sometimes we get questions about, hey, is the mic left open, this, that, and the other thing. If this light is just like this kind of regular green and it says waiting for audio, it is not the Squawker that you are hearing. It is some other sound from some other source. When the Squawker actually opens up his mic channel, whether it be to breathe or to read something, this will actually light up a more bright green and it'll say connected receiving audio. So a little pro tip there for diagnosing things if you ever run into that. Now, Bernard, you've been listening to Charlie for years, right?
Yes, I have. I'm glad you gave me a heads up because it's not such a simple answer. And
nothing is in the market, it seems.
No, if it were simple, right? The thing is, it will help you a great deal to know about a lot of different companies. At least you don't have to have a deep knowledge. It can be a cursory knowledge. But for instance, if Charlie comes across with a piece of news on a company that, let's say, there have been rumors on already, that's been in play, that's, has takeover interest around it, I would more likely to just, because speed is of the essence, I'd be more likely to not even think before I put that trade on. I would just, and sometimes I'll say that in the room. I'll say, I didn't even think about it, right? But I've been doing this forever. So for me, it's just, a lot of it is just kind of, marinating in a lot of information over a period of time. But you can help that process along by reading and by soaking things in about. Again, it doesn't have to be an in-depth, deep knowledge of every company, but just kind of a more cursory knowledge of what's going on with a particular company or a particular industry at that point in time. That will really help you to be able to react to news, because just to react to news without really knowing is going to get you in trouble. It will get you in trouble.
Absolutely.
That's just in terms of knowledge of the news. There's another thing. I don't trade without a minute and a daily chart in front of me. So if I'm going to, even if I like something and I go to look at it and I see that spike on the minute chart is vertical, I'm not doing it. Even, and sometimes I miss out because something keeps going, but I need to be in at, low enough of a price so that I'm not buying in the top of the spike. So you have to be careful of that as well. So really kind of two things. It helps to have a knowledge about what it is you're hearing, to know whether to do it or not. And also you need to be looking at a chart to see that you're not just buying the top of some crazy spike, because then you'll really get killed. Because sometimes these things spike up and then come down and you're out of luck. Another thing, since you asked, we have time to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got plenty.
If it is a real piece of news, okay, this works both up and both down. That first stick on heavy volume, you want to see a volume stick that's kind of like the biggest volume stick of the day, and that stick is just kind of vertical. You'll see a lot of time that first stick, if you remember what I'm telling you, you'll start to see that it's true. A lot of times that stick will reverse either halfway down, sometimes all the way down. If it's a really significant piece of news, you will see that stick totally reverse back up over the next period of time and then take out that high. It happens again and again and again and again. Likewise on the downside. You have a big down stick. It comes back maybe almost near flat, and then you'll see the stick start to roll over and come down and down and down and eventually take out the bottom. It works both ways. And I assume that's the same reason that a floating island works, because there's a reason for that first stick, yep, up or down, just like there's a reason for that first daily stick, up or down. It works in all time frames, but it just works. It's a formation that will work for you. I'd rather, if somebody doesn't really understand what I'm saying, observe it, observe it for yourself, because that's how you learn things. You watch and you see patterns, and that will help you if you can keep it in mind.
So that's a really good point, Bernard. And what really makes me smile about that is you literally explained exactly how I learned using this tool. I didn't have to say anything. You just explained it. That's exactly what I did. So I actually started using Benzinga Pro 6 years ago, long before I was employed here. And what drew me to it was, in fact, the Squawk feature. And it's a lot because of what you were saying, Bernard. I've got multiple screens, so I always keep Benzinga visible. But even if I didn't, or even if I'm working off of my laptop, which is sometimes the case, in particular when I'm traveling or when I'm at the office in Detroit, I will keep the Squawk on, and if I bring my broker up, I can still gain benefit from the Squawk tool. Once I'm able to hear what's going on, I'm actually looking at the charts, and I'll show you here exactly what I do in the next few minutes here. But what was so key for me is when I first started, there are stocks that I felt comfortable with. One of my friends works at Tyson, so I'm familiar with Tyson's business practices and different seasonal things of that nature. I'm really into Apple. I've been a long time holder in Apple. I'm huge into technology. Apple is one of my favorite stocks in the market. It's very, very easy to hold. I'm into a lot of other technology stocks, things like Square, things like PayPal, things like Zoom. for a more recent example. And so things like that, when I hear the news, I pretty much know how I'm going to react. But biotech, this is a great example because I've never been a biotech trader. And obviously there's a lot of volatility in biotech. And now with the coronavirus going on, it's even more pronounced. So one of the things that I did was I would let the Squawk play every day. And if I heard an announcement, ticker XYZ, whatever it is, and I didn't understand the business of that particular company, I pulled up the chart and I watched how the stock reacted to that news. And I started to develop patterns, or I started to notice patterns, very much like you were talking about, Bernard. If there's a piece of bad news and there's a big downstick, a lot of the times it'll actually bounce back up. Sometimes it will retrace the entire downward movement and then maybe start to trickle off. The more you watch this, the more prepared you're going to be when you see this in the future. And it's obviously easier to learn this when it's things that you're comfortable with. But when it's outside of your comfort zone, the more attention you pay to this, the better off it's going to be. So I want to show you a real quick example here. Let me see if you can see this here. So I went ahead and I loaded up what I use Thinkorswim for trading. And here I was actually looking at GoGo earlier. So this is actually exactly how I use Squawk when I first started. What I have here is I've got the SPY and I've got the ES, the S&P 500 futures, and I've been marking levels for a number of years. So that's what you see, all these red dotted lines. The other lines that you see here are pivots, persons pivots that are assigned by the study every day. And then what I'll do is I actually have a whole bunch of other charts here in different time aggregations. So I've got the 1 minute, the 2 minute, the 5 minute, the 2 hour, the 4 hour, the daily, and the weekly. And what I have on here are a whole bunch of different moving average lines. And what I do is I actually use this to kind of monitor how a stock is going to perform based on the news that is just released. So a lot of times if it's a piece of bad news and it sells off, you'll notice that the stock will actually sell off to one of the moving averages as it finds support there. The opposite is true. So when a piece of good news comes out, the stock will sometimes spike and actually stop at a resistance level. And sometimes by having the moving averages on here, it's very, very easy to see that. And because I've linked all of these charts together, it's actually quite easy to see that in one screen. Now, the reason that I bring this up and the reason that I brought up Thinkorswim in order to demonstrate this is because this is actually something that we're moving to in Pro. We, as Jonathan mentioned earlier in the broadcast here, we are looking to deploy our real-time charts very, very soon. If I had an exact date, I would give it to you right now. But I'm going to say that this is going to be within a week or two. Real-time charts are going to be deployed. And the next thing after that is we're actually going to allow you to have a widget where you can put multiple charts on the screen at once. And Bernard, they'll be able to do exactly what you're talking about. You'll be able to bring these charts up of the same ticker, put whatever indicators you want on them, and then you'll be able to choose your different candle aggregation period. And so it'll actually be much easier to listen to the Squawk and then watch how the stock reacts to that different Squawk news. This is something that I'm very, very excited about, and I'm working very, very hard to try and get this feature out there. So Bernard, that was great how you explained that. I cannot stress enough that you are absolutely right. When it comes to making a trade off of a news post, you want to have some familiarity with the company and or the news post itself. You want to watch how that stock reacts ahead of time or how it responds to that type of news before you're actually trying to put some money behind that movement. So that is exactly how I started. The more and more I feel comfortable with things, the quicker and quicker I'm going to be able to react. And the Squawk is a huge part of that. And again, if I only had this one screen here, you can't see Benzinga at all. So I can't see my signals tool. I can't see movers. I can't see the newsfeed, but I can still hear that Squawk when he reads it out. Really, really powerful tool.
In fact, an easier way to say it, don't trade something that you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a nice shorthand way of saying it.
Yeah. Could you bring up the details chart, Ryan, at least where we currently have the indicators and all that?
Absolutely.
There's just about 4 questions here about chart type stuff. So Ryan's bringing up the details tool, and then you click on the chart tab underneath the price quote. So this is the charting tool from TradingView, and this is what we're about to upgrade to real time with a whole bunch of additional functionality. And you'll see those red and green bars at the bottom, Emily. So those are the volume bars. And so if the candle ends up down for that time period, it's red. If the candle ends up for the time period, then it's green. You can configure it a variety of ways. And then, I saw a question about volume on a stick. So this is where you would find that within the Benzinga Pro chart. And then I think there was a question, if you guys could just really quick for our traders who aren't experienced in that, what a floating island is. Someone asked that earlier.
Yeah, Bernard, you've actually discussed this pattern before. I know it's hard to just find when you're put on the spot like that. Do you know of any chart patterns that made floating islands recently? Is it tougher to find in the type of market condition we have? Isn't a floating island a gap up and then a retest of the bottom and then a continuation? Bernard might not be able to hear us.
Yes, no, I can hear.
Okay. Do you have any examples on hand of floating island charts?
You know what? No, I saw the question, and I in this environment, I probably don't.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking here.
It's tough, but I'll try to describe it. In other words, it is a stick that opens well above the formation before it, and then does not fill the gap. See that's close, but it filled the gap, unfortunately.
So I think what you're talking about here,
that's close to one.
This is close. So I'll try to find more, but I just kind of wanted to explain what you just said. Right here, you actually have a gap, and on this huge stick, it actually gapped up. Now, a floating island pattern, as Bernard mentioned, the next day, this actually went down and closed the gap. Yeah. So a floating island generally does not close the gap, and it trades up around here and then continues on.
It almost always resolves up. It will resolve up 90% of the time, a true floating island. And I'd like them. I would like, the ideal chart in terms of that formation would be one that extends a bit further than that number of days. I'd like to see it over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then break to the upside. Sometimes they're shorter than that, but at least 5 to 10 trading days, and then breaking back up to the upside. But it just is a very, very powerful. And it's powerful for a reason, because there was a reason that first stick gapped above the whole formation and then never did fill the gap. So when gaps, people always say gaps are always filled. No, they're not always filled. And when they don't fill, it can be very powerful to the upside.
Absolutely. And
if we ever have a bull market again, I'll show you one. Or if I find one, I'll there must be one out there. I'll hunt.
No problem. And I'll just rephrase that. When we do have a bull market again, we will easily be able to show that. I'm sure that's coming. I wanted to really quickly answer another question that I saw here. Is Benzinga Pro for mobile in the works? Yes, it is. No timeline on that. Obviously, it's quite difficult to port all of this information over to a mobile format, but we have some of the best developers in the world, and they are hard at work at that as we speak. So yes, that is coming at some point. I will say, though, that you can actually load Pro up on any mobile device. So whether it's an iPad or an Android phone or even an iPhone, you can actually use it. But again, it's not been optimized for that. So, all right. So
there's a good technical question here. Actually, I think it's more about like which brokerages have certain types of trades available from Chris.
All right, so technical question. Do you guys know which brokerages or platforms allow you to initiate trades with an exit, trailing stop in place from the get-go? So, Chris, I believe, and Bernard, jump in here if you have some color on this. I believe what you're talking about is you're talking about setting up a second leg of a trade, or one cancels the other order. So, for example, if you buy a stock that, like at the open, you can instantly set a stop or a target to actually liquidate that position. So if I glossed over it or if I misunderstood your question, please ask it again. Looks like someone else in the chat is actually helping out. Schwab allows it. So Bernard, when you're actually trading, are you ever setting up some of these multi-leg trades?
No. I most of the time, 99% of the time, it will be okay to do that. But I heard horror stories. One in particular, to somebody I'm close to, who's a really, really nice guy, who's put a stop in, and the stop never executed, and he ended up losing a lot of money. And TD will not make good on it for him, and for him, it's a lot of money. And so, I just have, especially in markets that get very, very tumultuous, I much prefer to use mentals. It's easier for me. I'm not trading 20 stocks at a time. and I understand why somebody would want to be able to do that. But boy, make sure that your stops are being executed if you're using mechanical stops, because sometimes when markets get hot and heavy, they don't, and they're not going to make good on it. They certainly didn't make good on it, and he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of people at TD who had the same problem. He used the stop on a ladder. It didn't execute, and the stock dropped. The stock dropped a lot too. I believe it was LSCC was the stock. This little lattice semiconductor.
Yeah, and I've done that too, actually. I've set a stop and I've had the stock move too fast for my stop to actually execute. And the reason is because I had a stop limit order set, right? So when the stock actually reached my stop, my platform automatically produced a limit order at the price that I had it. But because the stock had fallen so much, that limit order was never going to get filled. Now that can be resolved by using a stop market order, but I chose to use a stop limit order, and I was caught because I had hoped that my stop was going to exit me from the position. The stock dropped too fast. It was too thinly traded. I was unable to get that stop filled, and I actually had to exit manually by using another limit or market order. So that has happened. I completely agree, Bernard. You really want to be careful when it comes to mechanical stops. A lot of the times, especially if you're watching how a stock actually trades, you'll notice that stocks will sell down to their support or sometimes right beneath that support in order to flush those people that have stops set at that level and then resume their initial direction that it had. So be very careful. Don't divert from your trading.
I saw some of the replies to what I said. I can double check this, but I'm 99% sure that the order, which should have triggered a sale at market once the level was hit to stop, didn't. He didn't have a limit order out there. He had a sell order out there that did not go off. He should have been, even if he were executed below the stop price, he should have been executed, and he was not. So I'm just telling you that happened, and it happened to more than one person there. So.
Yeah, really good point. I want to address another quick question here. Is it possible to limit what you see in the newsfeed? Yes, it absolutely is. So that's actually what these filters are. When you apply a category, a sector, or a watch list filter, that's what you're doing. You are actually limiting what the newsfeed is showing you. It is only going to show you what you have selected, whether it be the selected categories, sectors, or watch lists. And then the follow-up question is, can you remove, say, for example, option alerts from the newsfeed? No, not yet, but that is actually going to be coming with our advanced newsfeed deployment, which we're looking to do here also pretty soon, right behind the real-time charting. You will actually be able to exclude individual tickers or categories. I think we're going to call it a ban list or something of that nature. But that is not available right now. It will be soon. Right now, if you want to work around for that, and I know that this is a pain, what you want to do is you want to select every category but the one that you don't want to see. If you do go through the trouble to do all of that, please make sure you save your layout so that you don't have to do that again if your cache or cookies are cleared. You can save your layout by going to the 3 dots in the upper right corner and selecting the layouts from the menu, and then go ahead and save your layout. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Can I piggyback on that? So
yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people ask me, how do I get rid of all of these option alerts, or how do I get rid of all of these halts and resumes? And you can simply remove the signal source from your newsfeed. So when you click on sources, you just deselect signals, and that way you only get your curated newsfeed. You click done, and then you're good to go. And then in the meantime, let's say if you did want the halts and resumes but not the option signals, you could always use your signals tool, and you can just pick and choose on the signals tool which ones you use.
Absolutely. Good point there, Jonathan. So do we have any other questions, or is there anything else that we want to cover about the market or any type of stock calls that you're looking at, Bernard, before we sign off here?
Not really. I'm just kind of watching this head south all day here. So
so in an environment like this, like, what does it take for you to actually dip your toe in? Are you just a no touch? Are you what do you do? Are you looking for volume?
I was just actually watching Conagra pop 30 there, and it gave a bit of a trade through. But yeah, I'm still looking mostly to the long side because it's easier to see today. For one, but and just looking for a setup that'll that I can take advantage of. I normally don't trade against a SPY, So even if it's something that I like,
Yeah.
if it's moving against SPY, then I'm probably going to not do it. But if it's set up and SPY starts to, I don't need the SPY to surge up, but I just don't want it working against me. So I'm pretty much in tune with the direction of SPY. So today it's been pretty much down, down, down. Although we had a few pops today, but lately now we're getting a spike right now. We popped from under 245 to 247 here. So it's a little bit of up action right now. So Conagra, you can see, is giving a bit of a trade there through 30. It's giving a small trade.
The trend is your friend. Definitely,
Yep.
a good piece of advice. Okay, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're actually already 4 minutes over our allotted time here. Want to answer one more question? The ability to filter or block certain users in chat? No, not yet. That is coming. Hang on to your seat. That is coming, along with the ability to DM. We're working very hard on trying to institute that. So don't worry. That will be here in the future. Now. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Jonathan.
So I see maybe 6 or 7 good comments or questions here. If it has to do with features on the platform, definitely please click on the exclamation point in the upper right corner of the platform to add feedback. That way it goes to our whole product team. Most of the stuff you guys are mentioning are things that we are currently aware of and working on, but this way we'll let you know as soon as that's released. Whether it's the chat or the filters on the movers tool or, different types of alerts. So please let us know, all of these things that you're talking about right here. Secondly, if you have specific questions on how to filter the news feed, on how to use the signals tool, reach out to me or Ryan. That's our job.
Sure.
We love talking with all of you. So we can go ahead and put I'll put my contact info right now here in the chat, as well as there's that intercom bubble in the bottom right corner of the platform. So just want to say we're available. We're here to help you guys make the most out of Benzinga Pro, and this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bernard.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
And Bernard, I just want to piggyback off that real quick here. That's one of the reasons we like to bring you on. I see you every day helping coach people on how to navigate the markets, and which is especially imperative during high volatility like we're seeing right now. So I really appreciate all of the things that you do. Bernard makes himself very available to anyone in the chat all of the time. As Jonathan mentioned, I'm happy to help. Jonathan's happy to help. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to build a community where people help one another. We're all here to try and make some money, so let's try and help each other make some money. Bernard, I know a couple of days ago you were calling out someone else in the chat that helped made you money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think
at its best, that's how it works.
And that's exactly right. And we have a lot of really good traders in there that are constantly giving ideas and constantly helping. So really encourage that. I really appreciate you two gentlemen for joining me today. Hopefully we can have both of you back in the near future. What do you guys say?
I look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Be nice to each other in that room. Just be nice to each other.
Yeah.
For goodness sake, show some respect to each other.
You never know. Seriously. Because, I went through this big deal. You never know what's going on with somebody. You never know especially now in this particular time, you don't know what's going on in their personal life. Just give everybody a little bit of extra slack. And, we have to get through this apart from the market. And it's a really, really stressful time. So, and I'm addressing those comments to myself as well. So just try to be kind to everybody if you can.
Well said. I agree. Obviously, we're not going to tolerate harassment or anything like that, but we're all in here trying to make it better for one another. Be nice to each other. Enjoy. And remember, Zingers, until next time. Happy
Ryan, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Bernard.
All right.
We'll talk soon.
Have a good one. Happy trading.